everyone. Today we have our another new episode, and this episode is very important because we will discuss on unlocking carbon market. We have our world famous professor, Professor Fred Philip. He is president of Tando, as well as we have Mr. Marshall. First, I would like to give chance Professor Fred Philip. What you want to give insight from this unlocking carbon market and uh, how you want to educate this Asia Pacific young people.
Good day, Sharif. Thank you for inviting me again. Um, our topic is unlocking carbon market, and at the risk of being a spoil sport um, or a party pooper, let me say that on balance, I would rather lock the market further rather than unlock it. And here's the reasoning. Carbon credits only help the environment when they're retired or taken out of circulation, because that means that a company has actually, or a credit holder has actually reduced their carbon emissions. The credits don't help the environment when they're continually traded as securities. So the idea behind the carbon market is to help the environment and to ameliorate the climate change situation. And I want to talk for a moment about the former founder of the WeWork company, Adam Neumann. My daughter was an early employee of WeWork, and I think our audience knows that WeWork imploded rather dramatically. The company made some very substantial, intangible contributions to work culture and so forth. And I'm glad that my daughter was instrumental in that. But the impact on the real estate market was ultimately negative, and the company crashed in a huge amount of debt, partially rescued by SoftBank. So why am I telling you this? Adam Neumann, or Neumann, as he might pronounce it, the founder of WeWork, has a new venture now where he wants to trade carbon credits via blockchain. Now, commentators are saying that this is not just senseless, but actually harmful because it pushes carbon credits closer to being ordinary tradable securities. So this new venture of Neumann's seems to have, unlike WeWork, it seems to have no redeeming features, no tangible or intangible benefits. So the latest IPCC report just really emphasized how urgent the climate situation is. There's a lot of greenwashing out there. Things have become too urgent, environmentally speaking, to put up with more greenwashing, and too urgent to put up with shenanigans, including these financial manipulations, like the carbon credit market. Meanwhile, though, there's a lot of innovation in decarbonization, and ranging from precipitating atmospheric CO2 into useful materials, and even into edible materials, using drones to plant massive numbers of trees. These are the good things, and I think we should focus on them directly instead of trying to financialize them. In earlier video casts on your program, Sharif, we talked about the third way. Third way meaning that in terms of addressing the climate crisis, democracies move too slowly, and autocracies tend to be anti-science. So neither method of environmental governance is really going to save us. And attempts like the carbon credit market to save the world via capitalistic financial maneuvers is not going to do it for us either. So, nor is carbon our only problem. Of course, we've got uh, methane as a problem, and we don't have a market for that. Ocean acidification, there's no market for that. Nitrogen fertilizer pollution, there's no market for that. But these are all problems, real significant problems for the future of human habitation on the earth and the preservation of species. So there's been some success with government-sponsored and corporate-sponsored prizes for breakthrough advances in carbon, methane, acids, nitrogen, and so on. And just to illustrate the pushback, the senseless pushback against this, I was talking recently to a person retired from the American Environmental Protection Agency. They offered a prize for detection of nitrogen runoff from agricultural lands into streams and rivers. And there was a representative haunting the halls of the Environmental Protection Agency, a representative of big agriculture and the fertilizer manufacturers trying to persuade the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, that this prize should not be awarded, and if it was to be awarded, it should never be publicized. I mean, this is the kind of really vicious pushback that we get on this, but the prize was awarded and it was publicized. I can give you the URL. And so prizes is one way forward. And in terms of a third way of environmental governance, I have just drafted an article proposing technology forcing. Let me explain briefly what I mean by that. Around 1970 or a year or two before, Congress in the United States passed the Clean Air Act, and administering it became the task of the Environmental Protection Agency, and they set strict standards for automobile emissions, and it worked. The car manufacturers didn't like it, but they accelerated the development of catalytic converters, the development of engines that could use unleaded gasoline. And this was a huge, huge success because government set standards that could not be met at the current time and said to industry, by such and such a date, you have to meet these standards. What technologies you develop are up to you, but you have to do it. And it worked beautifully. Okay, automobile emissions were reduced very significantly. The air in Los Angeles, which is very heavily car oriented, cleared up very remarkably. And of course, industry people thought that this was tyranny, government overreach, and yet on the environmental side, it was hugely successful. So we really do need to do more of that. Institute government tyranny only to force faster development of green technologies, and the rest of life and government and society can remain as democratic as it is now. I know people question how democratic is it now, but we don't need to go into that. So, yeah, in the end, I really do believe we need a partial autocracy for the forcing of green tech, and leave everything else to the free market and to democratic processes. And I really don't believe that trading carbon credits like poker chips is going to really help us a lot. And that is my position on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Fred. Thank you. Mr. Marshall, you are entrepreneurs and you are trying to solve problem for climate change. So what is your view about this unlocking carbon market?
Well, Sharif, I pretty much agree with most of what Fred Phillips has said. Um, our experience is that these carbon credits and carbon offsets, which is even a bigger problem, all they are is greenwashing for the most part. There are some things that are coming out, and I'm working with two entities, Vera, which is a carbon offset entity in Europe, and the people called Puro.Earth, who were bought out by NASDAQ. And that's what really caused this spike in the carbon offset market and the carbon credit market. Carbon offsets are essentially the permission to pollute by having someone else offset your carbon pollution, which to me is ludicrous. It's like saying you're a doctor and you're a surgeon and you're going to perform heart surgery on somebody or brain surgery at the expense of somebody else's life. It's just insane. It's one of the definitions of insanity. The other definition is if you keep doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result, that's also the definition of insanity. And that's kind of what we're seeing here. So I totally agree with what Fred is talking about in terms of carbon credit market. For the most part, carbon credits are kind of ahead of their skis right now, meaning that they're all they are is an incentive to try to create more value and more wealth for the 1% out there, as opposed to people who are in developing countries such as Malaysia, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, sub-Saharan Africa, in that area. The developing world needs to look very carefully at what it's doing. It has a huge opportunity in front of it. And if you want a solution, Sharif, it's one that we bring right now. In fact, I know that you're going to be having a conference with development banks. And if those development banks get behind what we propose, then we do have a solution. And that solution could be done pretty quickly in a very quick manner. So my solution is the following, and it's what we're pursuing right now. The only way to measure and understand whether you have greenwashing, which is essentially a form of lying about your carbon offsets, and the other offsets that Fred talked about. He talked about methane and other pollutions. If you take a look at pollution and you want to address it in a fair and unbiased approach, you need to do three things. You need to use the 17 Sustainable Development Goals of the UN, follow those to the letter. You need to match as many as you can. Our company meets 14 of the 17 and will grow beyond that. The second thing is you have to go out and use the free market capital that is available. After COP26 in November of 2021, a bunch of private equity companies and private firms got together that were not influenced by big ag, big oil, big coal, big chemical, and those people, although they were all there and they actually together represented more than all the other peoples that attended COP26, which is quite ironic, because they were there lobbying and paying out money to people to stop doing what needs to be done, because all they care about is their self-interest. And I think what Fred pointed out is that if you're only involved in your self-interest and greed, what you're going to do is you're going to kill a lot of people. That's what's going to happen, Sharif. It's happening, and it's happening now. And it's happening all over the world, not just in the developing world, but also in the developed world. Right now in India, a lot of farmers are burning rice hulls. That doesn't have to be. You can turn all that organic waste and inorganic waste into a feedstock that can be converted to help reduce environmental impacts around the world. How do we know this? We have the technologies. We have 4 basic technologies that combined are going to do that. And how are we going to get it funded? We're getting it funded not through private equity. We're going out and going to the the Luxembourg Green Exchange and going to raise a bond, a climate bond. It's the only green bond out there that is rated by Morningstar, Fitch, and others. And why? Because they have stringent taxonomies. You've asked me before on these different programs, what is a taxonomy? Taxonomy is a set of rules that you have to follow, and they're very stringent. And that way, that prevents greenwashing. And what happens is if you don't qualify, you can't go out and even get the bond. We've already been pre-qualified and told that we have the ability to go out and get this bond. And we were also given a method to do it. If the developing world and their central banks step up to the plate without taking risk, and there's a way to risk mitigate, and they understand this, we can turn around the carbon offset market and the carbon credit market without having to invest in those markets. All we need to do is put people to work, have them good paying jobs, improve their quality of health care, improve their education, and at the same time, bring about a lowering of environmental impacts. If we do that, we have, as Fred pointed out, the IPCC just laid out its last report in, I think it was April 4th or April 5th of this year, and they had bad news and good news. Usually you hear the reverse. You hear the good news and the bad news. So what was their bad news and good news? Their bad news is that we are in deep trouble with a lot of the things that Fred delineated in terms of methane pollution, other types of greenhouse gas emissions, mineralization of the oceans, other problems polluting the water, polluting soil, polluting air. Instead of doing regenerative agriculture, we're doing industrial agriculture, which is depleting the soils. And who has the money to stop it? The people that are actually creating it. Are they going to do it? No, because their money is, they've been making the same amount of money for the same past 200 years. Why would they change? The only thing that's going to change is somebody new comes along on the block and offers a new opportunity, and then they'll come on board when they realize they can make more money this way than polluting. But right now, they don't get it. But the people out there that do get it are going to invest in these climate bonds. These climate bonds are oversubscribed. What that means is more people are buying them than ever before. Even in the middle of the Ukraine-Russian war, when gold is going up and precious metals are going up because that's where people go with their funds, the climate bonds are going up. Other bonds and other stocks are going down. So financially, the handwriting is on the wall, Sharif. If they step up to the plate, and we know that there's money out there, there's 130 trillion, that's with a T, dollars that is ready to be invested. But they have to find a way so that when they put that money in, it's not stolen, it's not absconded with, and it's not taken and spent on autocratic governments, as Fred pointed out. That it's better to foster democracy, health, welfare, and the 17 Sustainable Development Goals of the UN. If we do that, we have a shot at saving the earth and saving our planet and saving your children and your grandchildren. So, in my opinion, what has to be done is we have to step up to the plate and do this. Our group is doing that now, and we're doing it with proven technology. It's not something that we invented yesterday. It's not a new technology. It's technology that's been around 80 years, but it's just repurposed in a different framework. And we have the proof. As the co-chair of Working Group 3 from the Cost Action on Biochar in the European Union, I can tell you for certain that there were double-blind studies done for 9-10 years on soil amendments, on cattle feed to prevent zoonotic diseases, the kind of disease that we're seeing back in 2015 and 2017 with mad cow disease. We have a zoonotic disease now, which is a pandemic. And what does it cause? It caused collapse of a world economy. And right now we're about, because of the Ukraine-Russian war, we're about to have a tsunami food crisis. It's coming. Guess what? Our little group alone can help replant food in a great way around the world using a material known as biochar that, when it's formulated correctly, acts as a soil amendment. It improves water quality, it improves soil health, and it helps reduce GHG emissions. And it sequesters carbon. And you don't need carbon credits. All you need is to make it happen, and the markets out there will buy it. Will buy the biochar to make the soil healthy, to clean the air and clean the water. That's what we need. We need solutions, not bogus markets that are tending to do things. Now, what has evolved in this topic of carbon issue is that there are two types of carbons that are coming out of the mineralization business. You need to understand that. There's gold royalties and gold streaming. Right now, that's translated into carbon royalties and carbon streaming. And they're just another means to what we call bio-charlatans. Those are people who say one thing and do another. And they think they're doing the good thing. Some of them really believe that they're doing the right thing. But basically, what they're doing is what Fred just pointed out. They're actually propagating the myth that you're going to get wealthy and rich by taking carbon out of the atmosphere and getting paid for it. Well, if you do that, more important is taking the carbon out of the atmosphere, is improving soil health, improving water health. That creates jobs, not the carbon credits, not the carbon streaming. That doesn't create the jobs that everybody needs. Sharif, how many people, if we did the joint ventures in Malaysia, if we do the joint venture, and we're proposing to do one in Malaysia, as you well know, if we did these jobs in Malaysia, throughout Malaysia, and we got people on board, regardless of their color of their skin, regardless of their religion, regardless of what they think, as long as they want the best for their children and grandchildren, that's what counts. It's humanity that we need to address. Humanity needs this now. And if we address it now, we have an opportunity to not just only solve this problem, but turn it around and make the developing world a level playing field with the developed world and provide jobs, education, and well-being and health for the population of not just Malaysia, but Bangladesh, India, Pakistan, Sub-Saharan Africa, and other parts of the Southeast Asia area. Now, of course, there are other actors out there, and their goal is to prevent that from happening because they want power. It's naked power. If you want naked power, go with them. If you want to save your family and your children, your grandchildren, you've got to go this route. It's the only route, because naked power or not, it's not going to save the planet from the climate crisis. Climate restoration and climate repair can only be had if people are genuine and truthful. But that's not what we're encountering. We're encountering a group of people out there, big ag, big coal, big agriculture, who don't get that it's in their best interest and their children's best interest. All they care about is the almighty monetary system. That's not going to save them. How many children do you know of that have asthma around the world? It's getting worse. Why is that? Because of carbon that's going into the atmosphere along with methane and other greenhouse gas emissions. The interesting thing about it, Sharif, is we have the answer in front of us. We just need to get it done. And that means when we meet with your folks that you're bringing to the table from the central banks, if they understand it, at no risk to them, they can actually save their populations and look like heroes on the beach, as we say in America. They want to be the hero, they can be the hero. They want to be just they don't care about that, they can do other things. So that's my opinion, Sharif, and that's where I stand. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Marshall. You are a good man. Long time you are actually supporting World Talent Economy Forum. Uh, I'm sharing some practical experience because this is really important. Even my land where I born, it will be heavily affected for these climate change issues. Maybe I grow a very small village. It's called Rajbari in Bangladesh, and it will not survive. So that's why I'm very much interested to learn more about these issues. But fact is that is the things we are doing. Maybe there is a gap in between developed world and developing world. Yes, there is a COP26. There is a major conference of World Economy Forum and many things. But trust me, our team working with a central bank, energy ministry, ICT ministries, prime minister office, investment boards, in terms of policy and in terms of negotiation and how things will move forward, and especially this kind of developing nation run by a lot of entrepreneurs. I believe there is a lack of knowledge. Uh, Maybe you people can understand more and you can help our people to learn about these climate change issues, these carbon issues, these impact investment issues, the technology issues. Then we can grow. because many of the countries and the government, they, as well as especially the entrepreneurs, they become very frustrated when they try to get involved with this kind of mechanism. They become very frustrated because they do not get result. But what I'm learning from you people, this is different story. That's why I request our audience. I know we have a very valuable audience. Please share our content. It's not like I'm trying to share. It's 100% free. We never charge any single dollar or money from you. It's 100% free, but it will help you to grow. Beside that, this month, sorry, coming June, we have very, very special episode with Climate Change Department of Central Bank of Bangladesh and Central Bank of Malaysia, Energy Ministry, ICT Ministries, already Tando. They are very helpful. They actually offer very valuable speaker for this session. So hopefully it will be very important and effective for our development. Professor Fred, my major concern to you, how we can minimize this gap.
The gap between what and what?
Developing, developing world and developed world. Especially I saw there are many entrepreneurs, uh, like they do not know how to handle this kind of mechanism, how to handle this kind of projects, how to take
Hmm,
help from the projects. We have lack of knowledge. How we can minimize it, how we can train this entrepreneur.
I see. Um, well, I'm glad that to see we have audience from Brazil today. A very important election is coming up in Brazil, and the the spread of autocratic governments around the world is a real threat for reasons that we've talked about in previous episodes. And so voting for pro-environmental candidates is hugely important, even keeping in mind that once they're in office, their pro-environmental promises may not eventuate, but still you need to vote. And when this, when preventing autocracy becomes impossible um, at the national level, then you need to move down to the provincial level and the city level. And this is happening even in the United States, where the national government is very slow to move on environmental matters, and cities, especially cities that depend on tourism revenue, are panicking because increased summer temperatures are really going to put a big hole in their tourism revenue. And some of the Tondo Fellows are going to be addressing this next month in Sevilla, in Spain, uh, where summer temperatures are already very uncomfortably hot and are going to get hotter. So, devolving these measures to local government is going to be a big issue. I don't really want to address education at this time, um, but maybe a few other kinds of remarks may be helpful. I'm really glad to see uh, Marshall showing a uh, appropriate level of anger about this, because we know, as he said, that there are 100 companies in the world and a certain number of militaries in the world that are responsible for the lion's share of pollution. Okay, we know that we're not waiting for a climate apocalypse. We're not waiting for a climate apocalypse. Something like 1 in 6, 1 out of every 6 premature deaths uh, today is because of pollution. Okay. It's happening now. And I really wonder why we do not see more anger um, about toward these companies. Right here in New Mexico, where I live, um, there's a history of the U.S. military polluting indiscriminately, and part of this is racism because the state was primarily populated by indigenous Americans and by Hispanic people. And, the military is just so slow to clean this up that the anger is growing. And we need to channel this anger appropriately. Now, Marshall mentioned absconding with the funds. Uh, it's going to be very hard to prevent because the 1%, by which he meant the very richest people on earth, uh, are bent on accumulating more wealth. And why is this? I imagine they think that they can ride out the climate apocalypse. Uh, rich people, rich deluded people like the famous investor Peter Thiel is, buying land in New Zealand and building bunkers. But, maybe they think they and their family can survive this, and to hell with everybody else. So this tendency on the part of the 1% is a very dangerous thing, and could um, divert funds that should be used for more constructive purposes. Now, as for greenwashing and depending on corporations to clean this up, um, let's think back to the late 1940s when US President Roosevelt was going to uh, put a universal health care plan in place, government funded health care for every American. And the corporations lobbied hard against this. They promised the US president that no, they would provide health insurance to all employees through the employment. Okay. Well, you know that this turned out to be a big lie. There's this growth of gig economy where people are contractors and not employees. Uh, the healthcare system is hopelessly tangled. So if corporations say they're going to fix the environment, just do not believe it. Um, I'm hopeful about, well, not hopeful, but I wait to see the report from uh, this week's World Economic Forum and see what companies are promising. But I think that it should be taken with, as we say, with a grain of salt. Now, let's see what else. I do hope that we can find a constructive role for the finance industry. And I confess I came into this conversation not really understanding the difference between credits and offsets. So I think that's some homework for me. But Marshall mentioned the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs. Now, again, reviewing a little bit of history, the SDGs replaced an earlier UN program called the Millennium Development Goals. The Millennium Development Goals were very technocratic, top-down kind of thing that did not accommodate the wishes and the needs of many different kinds of constituencies in the world. So it got thrown out. There was a period of dialogue with many constituencies, and the SDGs were formulated. Then the problem comes up of how to prioritize, because there are these 17 SDGs, but many dozens of targets within the SDGs, and which do you work on first? Because we can't afford to work on all of them simultaneously. Well, again, this brings up the problem of top-down decisions versus multi-constituent dialogue-based decisions. And if the SDGs are supposed to be fair to everyone, in other words, save the environment without compromising decent work, without compromising gender equity, without shafting the developing world still again. This is a task, the prioritization task is something that nobody has figured out. And I reluctantly come to the conclusion that it can't be done. Fairness will not save the world. All of us, and some more than others, are going to have to suffer in order to forestall the climate apocalypse. And yeah, the total devotion to the fairness aspect of the SDGs is going to have to be put aside at some point very, very soon. Sorry to end on that pessimistic note, but that is where I'm at.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Sharidan Tatsuno, I'm a very big fan of your work, and especially your last episode with us on Metaverse. It's heavily promoted by our country's Prime Minister Office, Energy Ministry, and soon we are launching a very not only talk. You teach me 95% work, 5% talk. So we will take more action in developing world. So especially with the energy ministries, ICT ministry, 8Y, we will launch very special program, how AR, VR, metaverse, this kind of technology actually help training and development and energy sectors. This is our main target, as well as we will launch another interesting program with Central Bank of Bangladesh, and definitely we help them to develop policy on climate change. Bangladesh heavily affected by these climate change issues and many things. We will work as a team, and Tando definitely helping us a lot. And from tomorrow, we are launching our campus in Malaysia. And I'm sure our Tando fellows, they will offer many courses. We already start our work with students, with our team. We have a small team. We have around 100 people in our team, very small. We just started, and I'm sure uh, uh, there are many already. We are campaigning with guardians and with our campus, with our team. A very like enthusiastic team we have, very positive team we have, very positive. So what else? How we can minimize gap in between developing world and developed world? Remember, 40% people around the world still they are in remote area, still they are in grassroots level people, and they do not have food, security, energy, knowledge, nothing. World Talent Economy Forum actually fighting for this around 3 billion people. It's not small, around 3 billion people. They do not have nothing. Yes, we are trying to engage with them. What your strategy? What is your advice? How we can grow fast? Mr. Sharidan.
Okay, brilliant. Hello, Sheridan Tatsuna from San Francisco. I actually agree with Fred Phillips on his last comment. I've pretty much given up on international agencies and national governments because they're morally and financially, politically compromised. They're bought off by the fossil fuel industry. They will never act. You're asking people who are collecting money from fossil fuels and making money off of it to stop. That's like asking a grocer to stop and shut down the business. It's not going to happen. So I've pretty much written them off as leaders. Now, on the other hand, we have a chance to save the world, global south and global north, if we move fast and we're smart. And I believe the cities will do it. And here's why. Cities consume 80% of all energy as an end user. They're buyers. They're not producers, they're buyers. Secondly, they emit 70% of the carbon. So therefore, 80-20 rule, if you focus on the 20% of the politicians, right, who consume 80% of the energy as buyers, you can pretty much change the world. Now, this is kind of a thought experiment, and I don't know if the cities have the political will. The C40 is already taking lead on this one. But let's say, for argument's sake, the top 1,000 cities say, okay, let's go behind the UN. We're fed up with the national agencies. We're going to take the lead. And they say, from now on, we're never going to buy fossil fuels. We're going permanently to renewables over the next 10 years. Question, what happens on Wall Street? What happens to the stock values of fossil fuels? I can tell you, I used to work at Bechtel with the fossil fuel industries and energy, oil, gas, nuclear. I know how those guys think. Okay, I can tell you, and I worked with Wall Street with Silicon Valley. I used to advise VCs, big funds. I know how they think. Okay, it's all about money. It's only about money. All right, don't kid yourself. It's not a kumbaya SDG thing. That's the UN. It's just all about money. So the only way you can talk to people in finance is money. That's it. And the only way they will change is if the buyers, i.e. the cities, decide we're not going to buy fossil fuels anymore. Now, you can't do it overnight. Otherwise, as we know, 80% of the use of energy is just fossil fuels. You'll shut down the global economy. You have a Great Depression and riots. So we can't afford that. So the question then is the energy transition. How do we transition as fast as we can from fossil fuels to other forms of energy and different types of solutions? All right, globally, with the cities leading as buyers. You know, the cities, I'm an urban planner trainer, I worked with governments, control everything. They control the local budgets, the procurement of energy, the rules, the zoning, the business licensing, the business rule, everything. So if you want to operate in any city, you have to play by the rules. Otherwise, you know, you're going to get taxed pretty heavily or shut down, right? So now the question is, do our mayors and councils people have the political strength and will to stand up? Now, they can't do it by themselves because the fossil fuel can outspend them, you know, a million to one because they have the money. So then how would they do it? Well, the only way to do it is you politically unify. Now, and I won't use the word, but I'll say it. In 1973, the OPEC nations developed a cartel, the vendors cartel. The only way the cities could stand up as a political unit, in fact, we already see it now. There's a business buyers alliance of all the major buyer companies already in the United States. Disney, you know, United Airlines and all, they're beginning to organize as consumers of energy because they have one thing good about many of these industries is they don't rely on oil and gas for their livelihood. For them, energy is energy. Just keep the lights on. So they're agnostic. They'll go whatever way they can get it. And so right now, many of the companies have to look good, you know, the greenwashing and all. But if they had a serious alternative to use renewables at affordable cost, they'll make the move. And well, just like, you know, the car industry, GM and Toyota, everybody now, they used to do gas cars. They know that's history. It's over. Game's over. So they're all going electric. You know, GM is going to have to come out with major models 2025. So the auto industry doesn't care about oil and gas. They'll ditch them over tomorrow if they can. All right. So I'm not too worried about now. So it's a political issue now of the cities organizing. I'm writing a book about it, and I'm writing a 8-year roadmap, how we're going to get there in 8 years. Not the whole shift, because you can't do the whole energy transition in 8 years. It's going to take 20 years, 30 years. Because I worked at Bechtel, and it takes 30 years to build a city, at least. So figure 30 years to make the transition mostly to non-fossil fuels, 30 years minimum. Okay? But you have to start now, otherwise you lose it. In other words, if you don't have the plan up front, you'll never do it. So that's kind of what I'm thinking. Now, can the Global South do it? Yeah, I did it 30 years ago with Bangalore. Little story, real quick story, and this is what my advice to Bangladesh and all the poor countries. I got a call from SIPA, the Society of Indian Programmers, the young Indians. There weren't too many programmers in Silicon Valley in 1983. And they said, Sheridan, the Consul General from India and Silicon Valley wants to talk to you. And I said, why? He goes, well, you're the expert in Japan, Asia, and electronics. And I go, yeah. So he said, so we met with the Consul General, and we're all young guys, and he's like this 75, almost 70-year-old guy. And he said, there is a problem. We have a lot of poverty in India. And I said, yeah, I realize that. And we have an idea, and we're wondering if you can help us out. I said, okay, what is it? He goes, we have a little town called Bangalore in the south, and we have a tech park manager. Now, Texas Instrument opened up a chip software design center in Bangalore. Why would they do that? And I said, oh, well, they're in Europe right now, and they go around the clock. It's just cheaper in India. There's a lot of talent there. So the first question he had is, do you think we could build a software industry in Bangalore. I said, yeah, how badly do you guys want it? He goes, very, very badly. And he said, here's the problem in India. We have millions of young people graduating every year, no jobs. They go to the West, never come back, they grow up, they don't understand India culture. And it's really sad because they can't visit their mom and dad very often, every couple of 6, 7, 8 years. Instead of shipping Indians out of India, why don't we bring software into Bangalore? Would that work? I go, yeah. But you can't use satellite because it's too expensive. So work with the cable operator and just lay a lot of dark fiber right into Bangalore. And he goes, why would we do that? I said, you're going to need a lot of fiber data rate to handle an industry because it's going to be too expensive by satellite. And he goes, are you sure? I said, trust me, you're going to need a lot of fiber. So just get all of them and lay it out. So what happened was that he said, can you do me a favor? And I said, what is it? He goes, well, can you introduce the big Silicon Valley guys to us and open up the... I said, sure. So we went around Intel, AMD, everybody, and we said, guys, why don't you open up a design center in Bangalore? And there's Texas Instrument was the only one there. And then finally, so they started talking, which is good. And then the young Indians in Silicon Valley on both sides wanted to work, both sides, and they call them pilots back and forth, astronauts back and forth, so they could visit mom and dad every couple of times a year instead of having to wait 6 or 7 years. So we did that. What happened is the companies to open up their design outsourcing center, so I asked the Bangalore guy, and he said, so what's the problem you're facing? And he said, well, we have corruption, poverty, bureaucrats, socialism, xenophobia. We don't like foreigners. And I said, is that all? And I said, you missed the big one. And he goes, what's the big problem? He goes, you have democracy. And he goes, what are you talking about? He goes, the problem with India, you guys are always arguing over everything. You can never get your act together like China and just do it. And so you end up wasting your time just arguing, fighting over scraps. This is my advice. Silicon Valley, we can't work with guys who are always fighting. So why don't you get your act together and work together as a team, government, business, everybody like China does and Japan does, and Singapore, all work together in one direction, and we can work with you, okay? You don't fight. So that's what we did for 3 years. We just worked with the Indian government, the top level, Bangalore, and the tech. And it was so easy. The tech people just loved the Indians because they're so talented. And so then that's what happened. And then they said, how long will it take us to succeed? I said, it took us 40, 50 years. So if you guys work really hard and don't fight, you maybe 20 years. And then internet hit 10 years later, and then thing took off. So basically our little team launched Bangalore and I met the guy who's the tech park manager, and I said, what is your goal? And he said, oh, simple. We want to be the Silicon Valley of software. And I'm going, what? Because they didn't even register on the list. Like it was Africa and then India. It's like nobody knew anything about it. And I said, well, that's pretty bold. So he said, do you think we could do it? And I said, you can do anything you want because you guys are really smart and you're driven and you're hungry. And he said, if you want it badly enough, we'll work with you, okay? And they went all out. And, the government, contrary to what people say about India and all this politics stuff, when the government in India or Bangladesh want to really do it and they work together and they stop fighting among each other, you could literally do it. So today, we were using fax machines back then. Okay, so now you do this real time. So it took them 10 years. Today, you could do it like a year and a half to 2 years because everything's software based, right? You could do everything literally in less than 2 years. You could turn around the whole country in less than 2 years. And so the question you have to ask yourself is, my experience has been is how badly do you want to succeed? And are you willing to stop fighting and arguing among yourselves and work together as a team? Because that's basically, in Silicon Valley, we have one word. It's called focus. Focus on your goals. Work together. Don't argue. Collaborate. And if you do that, you have a chance. And work with other international people, not just Americans, but Europeans, Dubai, people around the world. Because they probably have a lot more brilliant people now. And plus, it's more affordable today. Silicon Valley is too expensive. So probably a lot of the talent will be like Ukrainians right now. Lots of talent there that's available. So I think if you work with the top people around the world, not just Silicon Valley or US anymore, I think you can move literally light speed. But that's just my experience. And, again, my advice is just focus and teamwork. That's it. And if you want it badly enough, you can do anything you want. So, but thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Mr. Marshall, what is your concluding remarks for today's session?
Well, it's an interesting session today. We've got a lot of interaction between political views, whether you recognize them or not, and a whole attitude issue, which I like what Daniel brought up and in his remarks in the comment section. But also, I think what Sheridan brought up and Freda brought up are views that I think are becoming more commonplace, and hopefully will lead to the actions that Sheridan talked about. I can't speak for others. I can only speak for my group. Our group is raising lots of money at an infrastructure level, but in a way that prevents greenwashing and prevents the ability to steal the funds, and at the same time manage the implementation at the same time. It does take time to get solutions in place. Our solutions are going to be 12 to 18 months from the moment that the funds hit. And then we'll start seeing results within 6 months of that. What kind of results? We're going to see a sequestration of greenhouse gas emissions. We're going to see improved soil fertility and health. We're going to see improved water quality. And then out of that, you're going to see improved health care or health outcomes of populations. A lot of the comments in the comment section today, like Virginia brings out it's essential to implement an economy for each country due to current and future climate crisis and social crisis. It's absolutely right. And Sharif, you've always brought this out. You've always said each country has its own culture, its own set of values, and you can't run away from that. Now, as much as I want to believe that we can bully our way through or push our way through or bulldoze our way through, it's not going to happen. That's not how human behavior is. I have a degree in clinical psychology, and I can tell you people don't behave the way you think they're going to behave. They behave they want to behave, whether it's based on something that's altruistic or something that's totally selfish. And it comes from how people are raised by their families and the cultures they're in. So I think that the best opportunity right now, and I'm speaking for my group, is to support the World Talent Economy Forum, get these central banks out there to stand up as guarantors for projects like ours, where there's no risk. There's a way to risk mitigate them, and at the same time, keep out the bad element that's going to try to steal the funds, and at the same time, create jobs that are good paying jobs for people in Malaysia, in Bangladesh, in India, and it's a heavy lift. I think Sheridan pointed out it's a heavy lift. Look what he did in his experience, and Fred spoke to the opportunity that the Sustainable Development Goals replace the previous set of goals, but those goals do have have a purpose in life. Without a goal, you're aimless. And if you have a goal and you keep your eye on the goal, it's like anything else. You can achieve what you want to achieve. And I think Sheridan's point was, if we all put our shoulder to the wheel, we can push that wheel forward and get to where we need to be. So my takeaway from this conversation on carbon is that be careful of the bio-charlatans out there, the people who will tell you one thing and do another. Identify who are the real players, in sense when I say real, I'm meaning people who will deliver carbon sequestration, who can deliver jobs, who can meet those goals of the Sustainability Development Goal. And by the way, in order to get a climate bond, you need to meet those goals. You can't get a bond without meeting at least one. And once we get ours, I've been told by the CBI, the people who verify these goals, that they're going to increase the number of goals that you have to meet. It's not all or nothing. It's an approach that I've learned from my parents, and I'm sure you've learned from your parents. that you have to strive and be purposeful and stick to your goal and go out there and achieve it. If we all have the mindset that we can work together, as Sheridan pointed out, yes, we can have to bring disparate people from different parts of the world, different cultures, different sets of values, but at the same time, we're all humans. We're all people that care about their children for the most part. Not everybody does. Let's be honest about it. But those who do are the majority. Those who do don't necessarily have the power, but they can gain the power by acting in their self-interest and in their enlightened self-interest. And the enlightened self-interest of the people that have the money in these developing world countries don't have to take risks. There's a way to risk mitigate. We can show that when we meet with them in that next session that you're setting up, Sharif. So I propose that everybody out there that's listening support the World Talent Economy Forum. And as part of the Sustainable Development Goal, it's educate people. This is part of that education process. So you're really beginning to achieve these goals already just by doing what you're doing, Sharif. Keep up the good work. Thanks for these wonderful people that are my fellow panelists. I honor the work that they're doing, and we all need to band together to get this done. So again, keep your hopes up, keep your eye on the goal, and pursue it. That's what we're doing.
Thank you. Thank you. Professor Fred, what's your concluding remarks for today's session?
Or nothing. We need to plan a transition. And as Sheridan said, the transition needs to be fast. But people with political agendas will try to represent this as an all or nothing thing. Oil executives will say, what a disaster for the world if we stop producing oil tomorrow. Nobody's saying stop producing oil tomorrow. They're setting up a straw man for political purposes. So please remember that this transition should be faster than gradual, but it will be a time transition. Daniel raised the idea of geothermal energy as an alternative in his comment. It's very, very promising. Some investors, including Bob Metcalf, who invented the Ethernet, he is investing heavily in geothermal, and I think you'll see a lot following him. Now, as for education, Tondo is seeking donations to network cities so that cities can share knowledge. This is one avenue for, we recognize that the conditions, the climatic and soil conditions and everything is going to be different everywhere, and solutions will be a little bit different everywhere. Meaning that when cities come up with local solutions and can share them, it means that not everyone has to solve all the problems. Everybody, if you solve a piece of the problem and share it with people, cities elsewhere that have solved other pieces of the problem, this is going to be key to the future. So how can cities in the developing world do this? The first thing to do is to identify centers of excellence in your local university. Okay? And there may be only one. Let's hope there's at least one. But that has to be given support. Whatever area of science or engineering or biology that your local university excels in, you need to expand that program, establish collaborative links with similar programs in universities in the more developed world, and so on. And then there's the question of people exchange. Every country will send students to the world's better universities, and if the economy of the home country is growing, or if the culture of the home country is sufficiently attractive to bring those students back afterwards, then knowledge exchange occurs and is very helpful. It was interesting to see in Korea when I started the State University of Stony Brook's programs in Korea that why did the Korean government want this? They thought it was because they had been getting diminishing returns from expensively sending students overseas, and they wanted to bring the foreign universities to Korea so that they could keep good students and the good students' money at home in Korea. So eventually that happens. Okay, for many years the economy of Korea was not good at all, uh, but students went back because the culture was so strong that it's very difficult for many Koreans to escape that culture. So the educated students went back, and eventually it made a very big difference. It created the Korean miracle. Okay, so don't believe the all or nothing, and keep the faith, and let's save the world.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you, Professor Fred. Mr. Sheridan, what's your concluding remarks for today's session?
All right, very good. Again, I think don't try to do it alone. Work with your early adopters globally. Work with your allies and friends who are willing to move fast. And that's the number one rule. The second is you should probably look at the tech industry as a major driver. I'm writing about it, but right now, oil gas is a commodity, which is going to be a stranded asset over time. And the future energy is smart energy, which is more like an Apple computer stack, all the way from core energy all the way to the top of services and products. So that's where the money's going to be made in the future, in a stack, not just in a commodity that's declining. So you have to rethink the economics of energy. We're stuck in the 19th century model. We need to think in the 21st century. And there's a reason why Google and Apple are some of the richest companies in the world. I think the energy companies, if they're smart, are going to probably copy the Silicon Valley models. But anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you everyone for joining today's sessions. I request all of our audience, please share our content as much as possible with your government, corporation, and academy. And thank you all of our speakers, those who support World Talent Economy Forum. We finish around 555 episode. Uh, yes, every day we are working and we are go for progressions. From tomorrow we are starting our new campus, new activities in Malaysia, in UAE, United Arab Emirates, in Singapore, Bangladesh, India, and Rwanda. We have a very, very strong team. These are the 6 countries we are launching from tomorrow. So, yes, from Tandro Fellow, we need more support. We have to educate our young people. With your guideline and advice, hopefully, we can develop new generation who can solve their own problem. Thank you, everyone, for joining today's session. Thank you. Bye bye and take care.
Thank you, Sharif. Bye bye.